I was born as Han Min-soo. My American name is Justin Winkle. My current name is Sunny Han. Generally, I think for most of my life, when it comes to using my legal name, people are very often surprised that like an Asian person that looks the way that I do, even more specifically, is the person that walks up when they like ask for somebody by my legal name. Part of, I guess, some of the phenomenons that I studied in college is that when people's expectations are broken, it can often produce like weird behavior. So I think just like if I can do like something small in my life that reduces the amount of like that kind of broken expectation, that maybe I'll have a little bit more peace. Well, I'm currently a student affairs professional at the University of Chicago, specifically in the Biological Sciences Collegiate Division. I support a number of their internal programs for their students. It's provided me a really good opportunity to work with students in a way that allows me to see like their potential and be optimistic about the future by like learning about what they're passionate about and what they want to do. I wasn't exactly the best student when I was in college, and I think I've done a lot of mentorship and worked with a lot of college students over the past 10 years, and the thing I find myself most often telling them is like don't be afraid to make mistakes, don't be afraid to fail, like don't think so hard about having to do everything right and do everything now. Until recently, I'd never actually looked at my adoption file, but and I'd never been told this, but apparently I was born like 3 weeks premature in Busan to a couple that already had a number of kids. And I was basically put into adoption like almost immediately after I was born. I was with a foster mom, I think pretty much for like the entirety of that like first 6 months until the adoption was processed. I think I started to think about this a little bit for the first time this year, but they'd never really brought it up or even spoke to it like that reasoning to other people. Like I never heard them. I know some adopted parents talk about like being like called by their faith or things of that sort, or speaking to a specific need, but like my parents have never really spoken to that. They were just like, they made the decision and they were happy to have me, so. One of the funnier anecdotes from my adoption is that apparently there were two children being adopted from Asia that came off of the plane, and the first one was like I guess they say it was like an ugly baby, and then they brought me on. They were kind of relieved that I was the second one and not the first. I think for what is it? I think in the adoption file they noted that I cried often when I wasn't being held, and I think generally that remained kind of consistent after I was adopted. That it's like I preferred to be held and swaddled. That it just like it made me more calm. Otherwise, I was like I guess a little bit more ill-tempered. I have 3 older sisters, but they're all 3 of them are the biological children of my parents. The youngest one is 7 years older than me, and then the next one 8 years, and then the eldest is 10 years older than me. I think when I was younger, I was very, very close to the 3 of them, and throughout when I was growing up, like each of them I think took time to kind of like care and nurture for me. Sometimes I feel like I spent more time being like parented by my sisters than to my actual adopted parents, because they both worked full time when I was growing up. But I think as I grew older, I started to see more about their lives, and as they became adults, like I definitely kind of understood that they had their own things to like process and work through. And so I've grown quite distant with the older 2 to some degree, just because it's like I think we're just in very different places in our lives. But the youngest of the 3 of them, Julia, who lives in Seattle and works as a teacher, she and I still stay, I think, fairly close. from like the moment that I kind of could conceive myself and the world around me, and like the first time that I was like able to look into a mirror at that point, it's like I immediately recognized that like I looked distinctly different than like my sisters and my parents. I immediately comprehended that there was just like something different about me, and then my parents were not shy about telling me that like they had adopted me from another place. I think they thought it was important to be like clear and open about that, and not it turn into like some kind of like dramatic reveal at some point when I was older. They liked peace and calm around the house, but my sisters would often fight, even over like small things, and I think that continued like well up until they were teenagers. So often like I felt like I was kind of participating in like the peacekeeping of like trying not to take sides and trying to like, you know, stop any conflicts that were happening even from a very young age. Yeah, so it was like I pretty much lived in like white, like middle class neighborhoods throughout like the entirety of my upbringing, and I went to schools that were like had a decent number like of students that weren't white, mainly black students, black and Hispanic students, because I went to school kind of on like a neighborhood on the edge of where like white wealthy people would live, and then more disadvantaged people would live like just a few blocks like down the road from that. Yeah, so I grew up going to school in between like Cedar Rapids and a closely associated suburb called Marion. And growing up, it was always, I think in elementary school it didn't seem to be as important, but like at the late end, like 4th and 5th grade, like it started to become kind of like a daily thing of people remarking or commenting on the fact that like I was an Asian person. And that, I guess, became more vicious over time. As I got to the back end of middle school, I think I realized that this would just kind of, that this, as long as I was going to school, was going to be something that I would have to deal with, is just like constant remarks and eventually like racialized bullying because I was Korean. I was very, very depressed. The racial bullying at that point had gone on for years. And like kind of feeling like that was misdirected, because it's like I have no control over that. I didn't ask to end up like this, and that sort of thing had just kind of like slowly kind of worn me down. And so I was just like a very depressed, very unhappy kid with a very short temper in high school. Because it's just like the expressions of like the death by 1,000 cuts, like I had that grew to be like a normal part of my daily life, is just being like harassed and taunted about being an Asian person. It's really interesting to think now that it's like in the past like 10 years there's been this huge kind of wave of like popularity for Korean culture and like interest in it, that is just like I to some degree try and take heart in the fact that there are kids like me now today that are not having the same type of experience that I did, that are celebrated, and it's interesting that they're like an Asian person or a Korean person specifically in those environments, because when I was growing up that wasn't the case. I think I just kind of had learned to accept that I was just kind of an oddity or an anomaly in both my family and also the spaces that I tracked in, because it's just like there was no way for me to be accepted the way that a biological child of my family would be in these types of spaces or doing the types of things that I did. Because it's like for a lot of the kids in Midwest, like white America, it's like they don't, at that time, didn't have that much kind of reference material to understand what an Asian person was. They just had kind of media presenting these stereotypes about Asian people, and so that's the only thing that they could relate to how I looked and and that just kind of like that was my experience of being reminded of that was the only way that they understood it. I actively communicated like these difficulties that I was going through to my parents, but they really just didn't know what to do. Right? These are people that have grown up in monocultures, and it's really hard for them to find like an analog in their life experiences that could match up enough for them to be able to like, we understand what you're going through. I think at one point, actually during like one of my more like emotionally like violent breakdowns, they straight up told me, it's like, we know that what you're going through is very, very difficult, but we don't know how to help you. Which is, I think, an extremely humble thing for a parent to admit, and maybe something that not a lot of parents can admit to when they just find themselves shorthanded on terms of being able to support you. But I think as nice as that was, I think that there were probably other ways and other resources that I could have been connected to at the time that could have like fundamentally changed like my life experience, and also then therefore the ability of me to be like successful as a student. When I was still an undergrad and I'd like first started going to Iowa State University, I met some older adoptees, and my hyungs showed me they showed me old Korean like action and like revenge movies like Chingu or Dongpari, like things where about like especially like people from Busan who'd like been like inadvertently through their life events like kind of propelled into like crime and that sort of thing. And so it was kind of like that was like the first, I think, real specifically Korean media that I had ever seen. Chingu specifically, and I feel like I learned a lot about that. But I think they also like taught me a lot of other things. Like they taught me how to play godori. One of them specifically who did a lot of cooking like showed me lots of like Korean recipes and things. And I think that was really that kind of mentorship. Like that's the kind of thing I think that would have made like a really big difference when I was growing up, is having people like that around me that could just show me that there was like more to it, right? That it wasn't just this like hollow, vain stereotype of being Asian, that there was like a vibrant culture and like deep culture that I'd been just like, I guess, kind of ignorant to up until that point. So after I had met these like older adoptees that had kind of taken me under their wing and started to show me things, I became a lot more engaged in like the Asian American community at my university. And so I would like take part in their events and go to retreats to like talk about the harassment that I had received growing up and kind of reflect on like what my ethnic identity meant to me, and kind of sharing in that also with like kids who were Asian from like Asian families who also had experienced the same thing. That it's like, again, I think that in my mind kind of completely divorced any opportunity for it to be like, oh, this is because I'm adopted. And it's like, no, even like Asian people who are raised by Asian people experience the same thing in these communities. And I think bonding over that and kind of coming together as a community helped me see myself and my ethnic identity in like a much more positive way. And kind of, I guess, like finally coming to a point after a lot of years of just kind of like smoldering in my resentment for the experiences that I had, that I finally wanted to think positively like about myself and about my ethnic identity as a Korean person. And it wasn't nearly as popular as it is today, so I didn't know really what it meant, other than like the few like little books that my parents had, which kind of had more of, I think, like a shallow like depiction of things about Korean culture, which is funny because I think like I did have like a toll after my adoption, and like my parents learned enough to understand like what items that they had that they should be offering me and like what that stuff meant. And then it seemed like after that, like they just like Korean culture was never again a part of like my life with my family. They did send me to like a Korean cultural camp in Minnesota when I was younger, but it's just like, I think I was a little too young. I think if they had waited like 2 or 3 years to do that, I think I would have engaged with it more thoughtfully. But at the time, it was just like I was so young and like hadn't really understood anything about what it meant to be Korean, so I didn't really care. I was just like, all right, you sent me away to do this thing, and the food is kind of weird, and they're teaching me some stuff, but it's nothing I'm gonna remember. I think it's good, but it's kind of distant, and not for any fault of theirs. It's more of just that as I'm like learning and engaging more with my Korean identity, I feel like I kind of intrinsically kind of have to distance myself from them, because I think like this is now me manifesting a version of myself that is like kind of removed from them, and something that they can't really help me with. That it's like, this is the version of the person that I want to be, and it's kind of distinctly very different from maybe the person that they thought I would end up being. They, I guess, kind of expect to see like the person who uses my legal name, like doing the things that they thought would be best for me, like right beside them, and just like the person that I am and the choices that I'm making now are just like so different from that. And I think it hurts them, and I think for me, I don't want to do that. And I still want to choose my own happiness, but I don't want to subject them to like the pain that it will be to not see the person that they expected. Yeah, I think it's just like I'm trying in some ways, I think even unintentionally before these past few years, I've just been trying to find a way to hold my Koreanness like in love and in happiness, in a way that I've never had an opportunity to do before. Like I think like more than being a Korean American, I want to be an American Korean, and I don't necessarily know if that's something that anybody else can give me. It's kind of something that I have to decide for myself. But I think it's important for me to like know about where I came from and the culture and the language. It's just like very, very important to me. I guess in recent years, I've started thinking that I know that having like 3 grown children before me means that like my Korean parents are very old now. And I guess similarly, my adopted parents also are old, but thinking that that they might pass on before I even ever get a chance to go back to Korea. And I guess to some degree, I have kind of, for my own well-being, kind of relinquished the hope of having that reunion, because I think that it's a very scary thing to think that you might be rejected again. Or I guess some part of me still rationalizes adoption as a rejection. And so that same part of me is afraid that if I go back now and appear before like my birth family in the way that I am, that I will be rejected again. And for part of me, I think part of me that is still deeply connected to kind of like the child and like kind of like primal experience of being separated from my mother, that it's just like I don't think that I don't want to do that if I don't have to. I don't have any resentment for them. They were making the best decision for themselves at the time. They didn't know, right? They gave me up with the hope that I would be taken care of and given a happy life that they couldn't provide me. And even if that's not what ended up happening, I know that that was their intention. Adoption to me now means, it means something difficult, because I know that there is nothing harder for a woman than being as a mother and having to give up your child. I think that especially like adoptive mothers, like years after the event, it's like if they seem cold, it's because they have to be, because it is such like a difficult and painful thing to experience, and on whatever happens to the child after that, it's just like you kind of cross your fingers and hope things turn out for the better. Yeah, just like that feeling of like difficulty, and knowing that that is a hard thing that affects everyone like pretty equally, even if it sometimes doesn't feel like that. I think for the past few years before the pandemic, it was a lot of like being involved and active in like the Asian American student community. I've done a lot of facilitations and like programs to support like Asian student leaders. And I think that kind of work did a lot to allow me to like channel it into something positive, right? That it's like these are the things that can help students now like stand up for themselves and be more confident in themselves as leaders in a way that I think was kind of like fundamentally withheld from me. I'm really grateful for opportunities like this to talk about my story, because I do think that opportunities like this continue to help me to heal the wounds of the negative experiences that I've had.